We all know that having a solid academic foundation is the key to future success. We also know that good schools help maintain property values, attract business, and enhance the quality of life for all residents and visitors. In this program every month, we will talk about the business of running a school district, one that the entire community can be proud of. In this episode, we will be talking about finances, one of the most complex and least understood elements of school planning and administration. We are one of 5 A districts in the state of Florida, which is rated the 6th best state in the nation. The school district is one of 2 in Florida that has received the highest financial rating among the state's public school system from all 3 international independent rating agencies, Moody's, Fitch, Standard & Poor. The district has received certificates of excellence in financial reporting for 8 consecutive years from the Association of School Business Officials International and the Government Finance Officers Association. A comprehensive study in 2012 by independent consultants MGT of America said Sarasota County schools are the best run school district they have ever evaluated. They noted our high performance and innovative practices. A strong public education system is a cherished tradition in American life, and in today's ever-changing, technologically based, challenging environment, it has never been more important to have a well-educated society. So, school matters to all of us, touching all our lives in one way or another. This is School Matters. Welcome to School Matters. I'm your host, Leanne McIntyre. This series looks behind the scenes at the business of the running of the largest employer in Sarasota County, the school district. And in this episode, we're discussing the financial matters of Sarasota County School District. With me are Mitzi Corcoran, the Chief Financial Officer.
Hi.
Hi. And then Al Widener, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer. Deputy Financial Officer.
Yes, correct.
Welcome. All right, so Mitzi, most people are familiar with the term CFO for companies and corporations, but what does that mean for a school district? What are some of your duties? What do you oversee?
I have the responsibility of all of the financial functions of the district. So I have the budgeting, accounting, accounts payable and receivable, payroll, all of the purchasing functions. There's some things that are a little unique to a school district that I have over me, such as our central warehouse system, the print shop. We have a centralized print shop for all of the school printing, records retention. I also have risk management and employee benefits and the retirement support underneath my area.
All right. So quite a massive structure considering how many employees we have.
Yeah, so it's predominantly, providing support to the schools and our teachers and hopefully helping the success of our students.
Right, right. So Al, I have to admit I had to look up your title and not really clear on what deputy would be and what your duties would be. So why don't you explain that as well?
Sure. I'm the assistant to Mitzi, basically. My direct functions that I'm responsible for is the budget for the total district, which is about $770 million. I do also the student enrollment projections for each individual school, and I'm responsible for giving the enrollment projections to the state. As far as in the budget function, we have what they call position control. And what that is before any position can be advertised, we have to make sure that it's in the budget and it's fully funded. So that's basically my main functions.
So not small either.
No, it keeps me out of trouble. Yeah, it keeps me out of trouble.
Well, and finances are either something people love to talk about or hate to talk about and have to deal with. And in the case of school districts, it can be quite complicated to talk about it. one of the things that usually comes up first is capital and operating. And what are they, and why are they two, and why can't, never the twain shall meet. So why don't we do some explanation of the capital budget line versus the operating budget line?
Sure. What I have heard quite a bit, especially during these kind of tough economic times, is why are you rebuilding schools? Take that money and use it to keep teaching positions, or supplies for the classroom. Why are you spending the money? And unfortunately, we're legally restricted on how those dollars can be spent. We have different pots of money. I call them colors of money, because you can't mix the colors or you get a different color. So, so what we do is we have to spend those dollars. They're restricted by law to be spent for construction of new facilities, renovation, maintenance of your capital assets, purchasing of those assets. So that's pretty much where the money can be spent. And so the board has decided to use those funds to rebuild, facilities that really were in bad need of being modernized.
And quite older as
right.
well.
Oh, yes.
Right.
As a matter of fact, what is kind of interesting to note is that while most governmental entities assess their capital needs and prioritize those, school districts in the state of Florida have an additional layer of oversight. We're not allowed to build anything or demolish anything without receiving state approval. Mm-hmm. We can renovate what we have already and remodel, but we can't build anything new. So it does provide the taxpayers with an additional level of assurance that the capital funds are being spent appropriately. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. Very good. So that would be capital.
Yeah, the one thing I might mention on that, by the way, is on the rebuilds, like Booker High as an example, 40% of the money is being spent for regular contractors within the Sarasota County area. And then overall, when you look at Venice High rebuild and SCTI rebuild, 70% of that money is going to contractors within the 4 county area. Mm-hmm. So, that's helping our local economy with all this.
Well.
Yeah, that was a big goal of the board, was to put people back to work by creating jobs through these construction projects. Right. And we were able to actually get these kind of fast-tracked in order to help to try to stimulate the economy by issuing debt. Construction costs were at, record lows, and debt borrowings, because of our favorable independent financial ratings and our low debt margins, we were able to obtain debt at a very low rate. We actually were awarded qualified school construction bonds that allowed us to rebuild Booker High School at effectively a negative interest rate. So no out-of-pocket interest cost on the part of the taxpayers, because we receive a rebate from the Internal Revenue Service, and then the funds that we deposit annually to repay the debt are allowed to earn funds. So we actually are making money off of the borrowings that we use to rebuild Booker High School, which was wonderful.
Wow, that's, yes, every homeowner would like to have that option.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but that's also a good point you brought up, Al, about keeping the money locally. So we may have been spending it, but we were spending it locally at a time when we really needed to stimulate and employ people. Exactly.
The operating fund, that's about half the total money that the school district spends. And the operating fund, as far as our revenues, they are basically the legislature each year sets the amount of money we're going to receive, because they actually mandate the biggest part of our millage, which is called the required local effort. And that's why taxpayers, when they look at their property tax bills, they see something that's called state mandated, and that's the portion that the legislature sets. Our other millage rates, they are also legislatively set, and really the only one that it is in the legislature allowing us to do the voted millage, but still that is something the legislature permits districts to do, and you have to go to the vote of the people, of course. The operating fund pays for about 4,500 positions, the bulk of them being teachers and teacher aides. It's the bus drivers and basically all the people that are in the schools providing instruction per se. It also funds the textbooks, instructional materials. And again, the operating fund, it also pays all the utilities. You know, people don't realize that our electric bill is almost $10 million. And so, you know, so because we have basically 42,000 students within the district, and the operating fund funds the majority of the instruction for those students. So that's basically what the operating fund is.
Okay, all right, very good. So now between capital and operating budgets, where does our local referendum money go?
That goes into the operating fund.
Okay.
Because it was basically, when we went for it, it was for operating purposes. And actually, the first time we went for it was back in 2002. And that was a recommendation from an independent study we had done that indicated you have a revenue problem. It's not a spending problem. And so we went to the taxpayers in 2002 and they approved it. And it has been funding many services at the schools. Currently what it's funding is our art and music teachers in all the schools, our elementary science teachers. It's funding the longer student day. It's funding some assistant principal positions at elementary schools. And it's about $40 million in total. And it's about 12% of our total revenue. So because of our revenue decline from the state sources and taxes have, property values have went down. Right. It now picks up a major portion of what is needed to have a quality school district. We're one of 5 school districts in the state of Florida that's rated A, and that referendum is one of the reasons we are an A school district. There's currently about 16 districts that have the voted referendum, because other school districts have seen with the declining revenue sources that this is definitely needed, and the taxpayers have been willing, or voters I should say, have been willing to come forward and vote yes for it.
Yeah. So many of the things you've talked about, funding, other districts have had to
eliminate
over the years.
Correct.
Right.
And that's we do believe that those types of services that the referendum is funding are vitally important to a rounded education and for a student's success, which we feel has been demonstrated by the results we've received from, we're 3rd in the state. So.
Right, student testing and school grades and so forth.
Right.
Well, and then as we were talking about budget cuts, I mean, we have repeatedly cut the budget over, the past 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
And what have those cuts, what have been those cuts, and how much money are we talking about that we really have cut overall in 5 years?
Well, it's about $124 million, and that's through cuts in what we call cost avoidance items. And actually, for the viewing public, we have on our website, it's in the General Fund Executive Summary, a detailed listing of the cuts every year since 2007, 2008. It's about 649 positions that we've had to cut since 2007-8. And it's been, we've had to cut reading coaches out of the middle and high schools. We no longer have the media specialists that were in the schools. We now have that serviced by teacher aides per se.
We've cut school counselors.
Yeah, the ratios for school counselors. We're still funding additional guidance counselors with the referendum funding, so it's at a level below what it was pre-referendum, but we have had to make some cuts as far as guidance counselors are concerned. And well, in my area, I mean, the departments have had to make cuts too. In my area, I've reduced my staff by 15%, and and all of the departments have made those cuts. We've made reductions in school support. We've had to modify middle school scheduling, and we went from a block scheduling at the high schools that would allow someone to earn 32 credits over the course of 4 years to a 7-period day, so 28 credits in order to save some funding. So we've made some big changes, lots of little changes. We've made lots of tweaks to transportation's routing. We initiated pocket pickups. Some of the savings were one-time types of savings. We have others that were large cost avoidance items, like our energy education program that has saved us millions over the last 5 years, just by not having to incur increased costs for the energy.
Right.
So,
And the other thing is 80% of our budget is spent on personnel.
yeah.
So that's why we have 649 less positions, because when you make the reductions, they have to be in personnel line items.
Right. You don't have anywhere else to cut because
Exactly.
that's what the money is.
Exactly.
But we did, we have made some gains as far as the, it's people and benefits. And in 2011, we went out to competitively request proposals on our health insurance, which came back very favorable. We got a 9.3% reduction, which was about $3.3 million for the district on our benefit side, which was very helpful. And then in the next year's renewal, it was another 2% decrease. The concern becomes, we know this year we're still negotiating, but we are anticipating an increase because of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act has a lot more requirements on the part of the employer. So we know there will be increases aligned with those. And then we have self-insurance programs that we've been able to, actuarially, they're very well funded. So we were actually able to temporarily reduce our rates in workers' compensation to generate some savings. And maintain rates at the other funds that we have for liability and dental insurance. So we've done pretty well as far as some of our benefits go. And our negotiations with the union, they have allowed us over the last 5 years to eliminate the board subsidy for dependent insurance coverage. We've eliminated longevity for all new hires after July 1st.
2011, correct?
Yeah, we no longer have automatic step increases on our salary schedules. They modified health plan designs, increased out-of-pocket maximums. They've worked really collaboratively with us to help us find ways to save money, so that's been very fortunate.
Right. So when we say we've cut money, that obviously is negative, but then at the same time we also have tried to do everything we can to save money so that the impact of those cuts doesn't affect the student in the classroom as much as possible.
Right. Our employee morale is very high, even though they've all received reductions in pay. Because 3 years ago we did the furlough days where everybody's pay was cut roughly about 4%. Then, of course, when the legislature passed that now all employees have to pay into their retirement, they took a 3% cut there. And unfortunately, the amount they've been paying for their insurance has gone up. So the employees have seen a net pay reduction for almost every year for the past 4 years. And this year is the first year that we're able to, and actually this year, even though we're given a 3.25% increase, last year we had a 3% bonus, which really works out to about 2.2% because it was based on step 1 of the salary schedule. So they're still not, even because that was a one-time and it didn't carry forward into this year, everybody's pay right now has been basically reduced. So even so, with this 3.25%, it's not even keeping up with cost of living at all. So so our employees, though, I must say, morale's been very good, and everybody's working very well together. And again, that pays off in the classroom because that the teachers in the classroom have been doing an excellent job.
Right. And that to wrap up that topic, so that really says that between the cuts and then some increases and some more money back from the state, we're still not where we were at levels for anything 5 or 6 years ago. So we're still not where we used to be.
Actually, our revenues are at 8 years ago. That's
Yeah.
where our revenues are.
Right.
So,
Which is better than last year,
Sure.
which it was 10 or
10
11 years
yeah,
ago.
it was
Right.
10
So
years
we
ago.
did receive some additional revenues,
Right.
a big portion of which was set aside, 6.3 million specifically for increases, which is why there are increases coming out this year. I think if we hadn't received the additional funding, we never would have been having the discussion about making any kind of changes to salary schedules.
Right.
So we're very appreciative of that part.
Right.
Right.
And that brings to a question that people also are confused about is how are school districts funded? So we have our local approved, voted upon 1 mil referendum. Then people always ask about, well, what about lottery money and what comes from Tallahassee and does it really come from Tallahassee? What about property values? So if we can kind of wrap up the discussion of, the overall funding, where does this money come from? And the impact of the recession on why we've had cuts over all these years.
Right. Do you want to start off?
Who wants that one?
Well, the funding for Florida school districts is primarily determined by the Florida legislature. It is viewed as a state school system, and so they determine the amount of funding. It's called the Florida Education Finance Program, and that's predominantly what funds the operating budgets for school districts. And that came about in the early 70s, Al, I think.
1973.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically the purpose of this program is to kind of ensure that every student receives equitable funding irrespective of their demographic location, their socioeconomic situation, whatever it is. It's just kind of an equalized funding across the board, and then based upon the wealth of your county determines your proportionate share because it's funded by both local and state revenues. So from the state side, it's funded predominantly from sales tax revenue. And then on our side, it's predominantly property taxes. We also have some fees and charges. And then capital budgets are funded from the state side from gross receipts taxes and motor vehicle licenses. We are currently not receiving any funding from the state for capital. Charter schools are receiving funding, but we are not. Our funding is coming locally through the local surtax for sales surtax, our property taxes, and we do have impact fees, although the board has placed a moratorium in order to try to stimulate growth. There's been a moratorium on impact fees, so that revenue is basically pretty much non-existent.
Lottery money that you're
the lottery,
referring
right.
to. The legislature uses that to fund what they call school recognition program. And what that is any school that has an A rating or has increased by a letter grade, they get $100 per student, and that goes to the school, and the local school staff and their shared decision-making team, or SAC as we call them, determine how they're going to spend it. And it is limited on what they can spend it for. It's basically for teacher bonuses or instructional materials, equipment. So they have a definition of what you can spend it for. They also use it to help fund the state-mandated class size reduction. And so the lottery, when it first began, we received quite a bit of lottery funding. However, during the late 90s, what they did was they went ahead and bonded the lottery money to do school construction projects. And so a large portion of it now goes to fund those bonds. And also they opened it up for what they call the Bright Futures program, which is for college students to pay their tuition. So when they broaden the use of the lottery, school districts really do not get that much anymore of the lottery money.
Right.
So, and again, basically, our whole state, our whole funding model is very legislatively controlled. We're the second most legislatively controlled in the whole United States, with Hawaii being the first.
Right, which sometimes is the challenge because we're a state where so many people move to, and they're used to how anything is done where they came from, and so the importance of this show is also to explain to them, this is this is Florida. This is how we do it. It's not how they do it in the Midwest. It's not how they do it in New England.
Right.
So we are a little different.
Right, and I think for a lot of people, when you lived in other states, you paid a state income tax that also funded your education program, and there is no state income tax here. So it is predominantly from real estate taxes or sales taxes that we fund our education system.
Right.
Now, we recently had, and just to wrap it up, we have a couple of minutes, an independent study, the MGT study, and the financial department was commended for management of our finances, the running of the department, our planning, fund allocation. So why don't you speak a little to that? I especially liked how they talked about how we distribute the funds and manage them. So let's kind of wrap up the conversation on that.
We basically have formulas that do all the staffing. And because the class size amendment that has, we're in grades K through 3, you can only have 18 students per teacher. And in grades 4 through 8, 22 students per teacher. And in the high schools, 25 students per teacher. Now, these are only in the core curriculum areas. So we have formulas that to ensure that we're in compliance with the class size amendment, because if you're not, you get a sizable penalty. The other thing that, one reason why we did receive accommodation by the MGT study is all schools are basically treated equally. And we have formulas that give schools more resources if they have more ESE students, and also if they have a high number of students that don't speak English as their native language, we give additional resources there. So when they saw that how we distribute, do the staffing, and they thought that was a very good method, because some school districts, it's the most effective principal whiner, you might say. But anyway,
like household allocation. Yes.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
Right.
So so they were very impressed with that portion of it, and also on our allocations for non-staffing materials and supplies, and that is also on a formula that again places additional funds based on the student population. And so based on that, we try to make sure every school has what they need to effectively run their program.
Right, because it is a fine line that you're trying to walk between making sure you don't have any non-compliance with class size penalty, but you're not overstaffing your schools, since we need, we have to watch every penny. So that formula kind of allows us to monitor that, and then during the first 5 days of school, we are monitoring each and every individual school's enrollment, and then at 5-day, the superintendent's cabinet meets to determine if there are any changes needed in the number of teachers at a school. And then we do another kind of mini staffing type thing where we make sure we're not overstaffed at our schools or understaffed if we don't have enough teachers to meet class size. And then Labor Day weekend, we may be moving more teachers, but after that we try not to do anything, because it's very detrimental to the educational process for the kids to be shifting them around or shifting teachers around.
Right.
So.
Right, and then the whole process starts all over again.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
The
Yeah,
budget.
it's a year-round process.
All right, well, there are many, many more questions and aspects of the finances that we could talk about, but we are out of time, so I want to thank you, Mitzi and Al, for joining us here today.
No problem.
And I want to thank our viewers for joining us here today. We will see you next time on School Matters.